not even Christian. I don't have a dog in this hunt. I just feel a certain loyalty to the truth. Let's be honest. Let's be factual. Let's be truthful. Because ultimately, if there are things that have to be acknowledged, facts have to be acknowledged. If there are things that have to be repaired or changed, then they have to be based on fact. They have to be based on truth. And I'm very disturbed by this, once again, this knee-jerk sort of calling, pointing the finger at the Catholic Church and saying, bad Catholic Church, you've done these terrible things, and how could you do them? Well, in the first place, it wasn't just the Catholic Church. And at some point in time, I think the government of Canada, the administrators, the overseers of these institutions have to bear some responsibility as well for what was going on. But we've already dealt with all of this stuff. This is all part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and study and everything that went on a number of years ago. There's nothing new here. There may be specific particulars that are new. In other words, we didn't know about this particular burial site, okay? But everything else, okay, we knew about already. There's nothing new here. And so I guess what I'm saying again is, with as sensitively as I possibly can, it's time to turn the page on this a little bit. Yes, there is aftermath that still has to be dealt with, but affixing blame, going after perpetrators and stuff like that, I don't think that's. I just don't think that it's appropriate at this stage anymore. It's kind of like, as Yogi Berra once said, right? Deja vu all over again.
Yeah, no kidding. It is certainly a black mark on our history. Nobody's going to deny that, least of all me, because I don't like rewriting history just because I find it uncomfortable. There's a huge trend towards along that line. I think they just pulled down the founding statue of the founder of Ryerson University. A bunch of empty-headed kids decided that they couldn't have a man like that as their founder. Well, it doesn't matter whether they pull a statue down or not. He was their founder. Anyway, so, changing names and taking down statues and all that stuff, that's all, to me, it just shows a very shallow and very misguided understanding of what history is and what it's all about. And I certainly think that in this case, even the chief of the band that contributed the most students to this particular school, because it wasn't limited to just them, but she said, I am against pulling down these buildings. I want the history to remain as ugly as it is so that we can learn from it. And on that score, her and I completely agree. Look, history is what it is. Some of it's, most Canadian history is amazing, and there are some dark chapters. But to write out the dark chapters or to revise based on modern sensibility what happened 100, 200, 500, or even 50 years ago, it to me makes no sense at all. And you're defeating the whole point of learning from history if you take down the reminders that are there to make you think about it. And that's why it's so counterproductive to do that. Because if you don't know about the mistakes of the past, you're bound to repeat them.
Well, I don't like the idea of pulling down statues, and for a number of reasons. I'm probably a little bit more sympathetic, given my own background, to the the pulling down of statues, or the desire to not have institutions named after people that have perpetrated horrendous crimes against a particular race or whatever. I'm more sympathetic than other people necessarily would be. I'm still opposed to it, don't get me wrong, but I understand where the sentiment comes from to a degree.
Well, it depends on who you're talking about, right?
It does, and there has to be a certain amount of context, and where am I going with this? I guess, Nick, one of the things I would probably say here is that the people who are doing the pulling down, they also don't have a dog in the hunt. You know, they're not victims of anybody, and I can't help but think that there's a certain amount of trying to prove things that, you know, I'm a better person, and this way I could sleep at night and give myself a pat on the back because I've demonstrated my anti-racist credentials by defacing a statue of Sir John A. Macdonald, or I've knocked over a statue of Ryerson or whatever. You know, there's a certain element of fakeness to it, if you will.
If you think about it, they call it virtue signaling. But what virtue are you signaling when you do that kind of thing? What virtue is there in trying to make yourself feel better about a situation you had nothing to do with, are not affected by, and cannot possibly change? So what virtue is it? I mean, if you're going to virtue signal, then this is where we run into this black hole of intelligence where there just isn't any. And they get caught up in the emotionalism, and this is part of what some political groups in Canada or in Western world they feast on is emotionalism, not common sense, logic, and reason. I mean, there's one thing to be emotional about or passionate, maybe is a better word, about a topic, but make sure your passion's grounded on fact or grounded on solid footing, not just, oh, he owns slaves, well, let's tear that down. Well, people who say that don't know that, or don't tear down statues of Polynesian slave owners, or people who were, Muslim slave owners, or people who were Roman slave owners. Julius Caesar, you go down the list. There's all kinds of different people in our history who owned slaves that still have statues standing to them. It's just, for some reason, it's only here in North America that they've decided that slavery is a terrible thing. And I'm not suggesting it's a good thing, but it's been with us for, several millennia now. I'm
glad you're not suggesting it was a good thing.
No. It's let me make that point perfectly clear.
Yeah, that's one of those. That's one of those things can very quickly get twisted out of context.
That's right. So let's make sure it doesn't get twisted out of context. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Nick is not in favor of slavery.
No, he's not. I know the guy, and he would never be in favor of that.
Okay.
But the point is that you've got, and I'm just picking slavery out of the blue, but you've got a bunch of people who think they can turn a topic to their advantage, both economically and socially, and manipulate it to the point. Like there's one woman in the United States who figures that all the land that white people own should be turned over to black people.
Right.
Because it's all the product of slavery.
Well,
I'm sorry.
You know what
it's nonsense.
As I say, Nick, people don't get to lecture me about what it means to be part of an oppressed people. And my response to slavery is this. I'm sorry about what happened to your people. It was wrong. It was terrible. But it wasn't me.
That's right.
And if that sounds insensitive, I'm sorry. I don't mean it to be. I'm just saying the fact. It's the fact. And here's the other uncomfortable fact, Nick. It wasn't you either. I mean, it wasn't them either. There's now with residential schools, that's different. There are people who are still around that were, part of this and were subjected in some cases to abuse. And I get that. That's a different thing altogether. But, when you talk about slavery and compensation for, what happened 300 or 400 years ago or whatever, well, that's just, to me, that's just, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, what can you do, Nick? I'm just looking at the clock here, and I see that we're coming up already to the bottom of the first hour. So I think maybe what we'll have to do is go for our break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some other things, I guess.
We've got plenty on the sched just yet.
We do. That's true. Okay, so stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a few minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.